Hello, Kim.
Hello
Hello.
there.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Fantastic. What time is it in your country?
It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon here in Stockholm.
Oh, that's not bad. It's 7:30 here. So, and we've got lots of friends who are joining in now. We got Jay Pratap, Sumit, Ranju, Shailesh, Nitesh. We got Lee from Taiwan, I think. And we've got lots and lots of friends coming in. So we're going to give them a few more minutes to join in. In the meantime, I want to welcome you and welcome all the friends here. Welcome to our series of webinars from Asian Adventures and our Global Wildlife Fair. So, friends who know a bit about me, that's fantastic. Those who do not know about me, um, I first wanted to write yes if I'm clearly audible. And then I'll quickly introduce myself. I am not the speaker here today. It's Kim Ross who's the speaker. So she will need more time with a presentation and with her introduction. And I'll quickly tell you that there's a series of webinars that we've been doing for last 4 years now. I think in terms of nature-centric webinars, we do the most in India. I'm Mohit Aggarwal, that's my name, and I am the founder of Asian Adventures, which is a 31-year-old conservation travel company, the largest bird watching company in India. And I'm also the founder of Global Wildlife Fair, a fair that's going to happen in October in New Delhi, and it's a global fair. It's an international fair. So if you haven't got your free passes, please claim your free passes so that you can be there. And this is, I'll tell you all about it in a few days about Global Wildlife Fair, or you can go to the website and check it out. And then I'm also, two big names which are partnering with us in Global Wildlife Fair are Wildlife Trust of India and Asian Ecotourism Network, which is the Asian body of Global Ecotourism Network. And so that's how it is. I'm on a mission to save wildlife on the planet and for you all to celebrate all life forms. I have a friend who I met on LinkedIn a few months ago, and I got to know about her work, and I'm really inspired with what she does. Her name is Kim Ross, and she's right here with us. And I'm going to quickly read out her short introduction, and then she's going to talk about herself. So Kim Ross is a tourism strategist who supports regenerative development in Scotland, Sweden's Arctic region, and around the Nordics. With a focus on nature tourism, she has worked with Sweden's eco-certification Nature's Best and launched Visit Scotland's quality assurance scheme for wildlife experiences and activity providers. She's currently carrying out research in Masai Mara in Kenya, deepening knowledge of community-based tourism in conservation. So that was a short intro by me, but I'm sure when she unfolds her magic through her presentation, you'll know a lot about her. So I'll quickly have a look at the chat. Guys, oh, welcome. My old friend is here. Gaurav Nalkur is also here. Oh, wonderful. Gaurav, actually, you should be conducting this session, man. So if everybody can hear me well, I'll hand over the dais, mic, everything to Kim to take over. Kim, over to you. I'm going to go silent now, and I'll also hide myself, but I'm in the background listening to you. Also, if there's a glitch in the system, friends, don't go away. I have a thing called panic button here, which I will press, and it'll reboot. The system will reboot, but you don't go anywhere because you'll be able to come back to the presentation in no time. So over to you, Kim.
Mohit, thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. Really nice to be here. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone else. I'm calling here from Stockholm in the Nordics, and the opportunity to share a little bit about how we work with regenerative tourism here and also in my past life in Scotland. I have a few stories to share, but I wanted to start off by sharing something. And I'm going to explain a little bit now. I had a few videos lined up to show you today. They're all on YouTube. And in the last week, apparently, YouTube has limited access to them. So I'm going to be telling you about the videos that I would have shown you. But this is the first one that I wanted to share. And this is a video, a moment actually, up in the Arctic north of Sweden, where I used to live for a year. And I was sitting all alone, watching the sunset, looking at this river that we see in front of us. And it was just silent and peaceful. And out of nowhere came this crackling, loud, profound noise out of nowhere. And that noise was the sound of a river freezing. And that's one of the most impactful memories and transformative experiences that I have had. And I just wanted to share that because although we're going to talk a lot today about experiences and visitors and the guest journey, I wanted to say that sometimes the most profound memories can be the simplest that are passed on through nature or through the people that you meet during an experience. So hold on to those thoughts whilst we go through this journey of stories. Here you see on the right-hand side, a crazy long orange country, which is Sweden. And that covers sort of 4 weather zones almost, 4 different climates. And that might be not unusual in the likes of India, where you have a really big country. But here in Europe, it's quite unusual to have a Mediterranean south and an Arctic north. So I've got some stories of my time working here. And in the green island of the UK, you can see Scotland in the very top. Some stories that come from my time working at Visit Scotland for 15 years there. All of these stories will connect with the sort of the Sustainable Development Goals in a tourism context. So I hope that works well. A little bit about my backstories, just so you know where I'm coming from. I've had 25 years working with tourism development. I've worked with different accreditation tools, labels, eco-certifications, organisations, government bodies, projects and companies. So I wear many different hats in many different ways, but the bottom line is always about sustainable, regenerative experiences. So I've picked 3 that I'm going to share with you today. I start at the bottom, Nature's Best Sweden. That's an eco-certification here in Sweden for nature-based tourism companies, and they've recently got their GSTC recognised status. Then Swedish Welcome. That's why I'm here actually in Sweden. I came to set that up. It's a development tool that's completely aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. And then Visit Scotland, where I set up and worked with the Quality Assurance Scheme for 15 years. So these are some stories which I get from the industry. And so your stories are as important as anything in this journey that I've had for the last 23 years. So Visit Scotland, I'll start off with a story which is very impactful. They did a survey of 100 tourism companies, and they asked those tourism companies, did you do something during your experience to exceed your guest expectations? And those companies, 90% of them said, yeah, we definitely did. Then they interviewed all of the visitors who had been visiting those 100 companies and said, did your experience exceed your expectations, or was there something that added value or transformational experience to that? And 90% of them said no. It just felt like a good experience, but there was nothing that went beyond. So what this survey was really interesting for was that it showed the discrepancy between what a tourism experience might think they offer and what a visitor or a traveller actually feels. So some of these stories will focus on that. And that has been my red thread through most of my tourism experience. I've been working with tools which enable an incognito method where I become a normal visitor, but I go through the whole guest journey from website, social media, making a booking, having the experience, staying overnight, being guided, eating food, all of the whole experience, saying goodbye, any follow-ups that happen. So the whole guest journey is analysed, and then we sit down with the company and do a sort of feedback session to see where they want to be and how they'd like to develop. So that's one half of what I've done. And then the other half is to do a sustainability audit for those companies. So that's looking at probably around 40 different things, the guest journey 60, so all told around 100. And here you see me hanging out in various showers of camping sites, trying to measure water flow to think about conservation of water. So that's a little flavour of what I have been getting up to in the past 23 or so years. But today we're going to cover these themes, and they will be woven through some of the stories that I'm going to share. Creating sustainable memories, a sense of place. How do we connect that with the visitor who comes on our experiences, and so that they really feel it? Data and destination management, that's really important when we're looking at capacity of various destinations these days. Community-led impacts and how they benefit communities. We want to welcome responsible travellers, but how do we communicate that to them? Balancing seasonality, inclusivity, because everyone is welcome, transformative travel, and nature's best ecotourism labelling, which may be more connected to the sort of sectors that you're all working in now. So that's what we're going to do. So what I'm going to start off just by giving a little overview of where is Sweden in relation to tourism and sustainability. Well, in terms of being net zero, Sweden is aiming at 2045, and it's written in law. So there's a law in Sweden that everyone needs to be carbon neutral, zero, by 2045, and that includes tourism businesses. So there's an extra impetus for tourism, and it's in the tourism strategy that there has to be experiences that are for visitors, so they only have the choice of something which is deeply sustainable and regenerative and low carbon, if not zero. So that's the agenda in Sweden. But for over 20 years, Sweden has been offering experiences which are immersed in forests and nature. We have the Tree Hotel, which has been kind of iconic and around for 20 years and appears in all the top-end magazines. But it's really generic through a lot of the experiences that Sweden has. And Nature's Best, the eco assessment label, has been around for 20 years also. So Sweden has definitely been using its natural attributes then and now. So where we have a big sort of push towards thinking about digital nomads or workation, as became the theme during COVID times, finding somewhere with an empty space to work, then Sweden has been marketing itself and Visit Sweden on the back of those things, those themes. The edible country is another theme, because there's lots of foraging goes on here with berries and mushrooms and lots of different types of nature, fruits from nature. And what they did was this interesting theme, and they asked for 15 tables to be placed in nature in coastal and forest locations throughout the whole of Sweden. And they did a PR work on the edible country and how Sweden can provide a lot of interesting foods that you just forage and cook on an experience deep in the forest and in the nature. Wellness is another theme that captured the attention, with Visit Sweden doing a 72-hour cabin event where they placed cabins in nature. They took some high-profile A and B listers who were very stressed in life, measured their blood, their temperature, their blood pressure, their heart rates, and all other characteristics before they went into the cabin. And 72 hours later, of course, they emerged feeling totally de-stressed, at one with nature, and also feeling more creative. So that was another ploy to connect with nature. But here you see an overview of how Visit Sweden perceives itself and the market that it would like to attract. It wants responsible travellers to come and visit. So it features ecotourism, travelling with kids, the right to access, which is a Swedish, I say law, but it's a regulation which we all should respect nature, but we're allowed to freely roam around Sweden. The Swedish Lapland culture in the north, where and when to see the midnight sun. It never gets dark in the Arctic season in June and July. Likewise, it's never daylight in December, January in the very north, and you see the northern lights. We have our Sami tribal nomadic northern people who provide a really contrasting culture and an experience in the north. And we have amazing, unusual spa and sauna and new contemporary developments. So these are just a flavour of how the nature and culture of Sweden is incorporated both traditionally and in modern developments. So slow travel, that theme of being quite calm, connected to nature, and simplicity is something that Sweden truly focuses on. Not fuss, not noise, but just something really wholesome and qualitative. I'm thinking a lot about a sense of place, and we're all very busy creating experiences in the environments that we work in. But how does a visitor, how does a traveller actually feel the sense of place from where you're from? So I explored that a little bit. And in Scotland, there was a project where they created a website and a platform to gather stories. And this could be a simple sentence, or it could actually be a long, epic story about something that had either happened in the destination, at the place itself, or the people. And they captured all these stories, which of course will disappear within a few generations. And this is now a great resource which can be used by different organizations or companies, but they're there forever. And they give something that you can create a product or an experience or enhance your guiding with in order to give that sense of place. In Sweden, they really want to try and connect the local with the traveller. And they've created a platform where you can actually book experiences with local people. So here you see a few examples: hiking up the hills, a horse-drawn carriage, going mountain biking with somebody local. I had a holiday myself for a few days in an archipelago just south of Stockholm. And what I came back with was a real deepening knowledge of the sense of place that I'd been in. And that was thanks to this guy, Johan, whose dad used to manage the lighthouse, which was where I was actually staying. So I got some stories from him. This is Gunnar. She rented the kayaks. This is her family tourism business. She's the second generation running it. So she knows so much about the archipelago, the nature, the culture. And these are her little red stuga. That's the cabins that she hires out. Caroline has a farm on one of the islands. She's third generation on that farm, and she's decided to set up a restaurant with some food that's produced from that farm, from the animals, and has a lot of stories to tell around provenance and local food sourcing. These guys took me on a walk along the coast to experience some of the geology. It's a very special coastline, and there's some rock formations which you wouldn't normally see. You have to know where to go. That was an amazing moment. This is Christer. He hired a kayak and I slept in a tree tent. And he told me about some of the sad challenges, actually, which are faced by the Baltic Sea, where we were paddling, and the environment and some of the activities that are happening there in order to improve the marine environment. This is Ola, and he has a smokery. So even if the sign says closed, if you drive in, he'll open up and you can buy some smoked fish and smoked cheese. And lastly, this is Marcus, and he is the 15th generation to live on this island called Harstena. And he now pilots the boat that can take visitors on guided tours to that island. So his stories and connection is very, very deep. David is a guide, and I asked him, what's the most emphatic thing that your travellers have found about on some of your tours? What's the really memorable experience? And he said, they find it amazing that we can actually drink water from streams in Sweden, straight out of the stream. So sometimes it's the small thing that makes the difference. And that's really what I wanted to share. I wanted to share that essence that we don't have to be doing crazy, deep, busy, meaningful things to create the most meaningful experience for your traveller. All right. Something that we all need to be doing is measuring and monitoring, especially if we want to manage tourism, because we know it's on an incremental incline and that isn't going to change in the next few years. So data and destination management. It's really important, and how we can do this is very different depending on the type of destination that we are and the type of experiences that we offer. So I'll share a few examples from the region that I've been working in just south of Stockholm. It's called Östergötland. It has one of Europe's most prominent wildlife lakes, and this is located right next to an eco park, Lake Tokern. Now, Lake Tokern had challenges not really too heavily in summer, but they're in a position in a lot of places in Sweden, actually, where tourism can be managed to prevent negative impact. And that's where they were. So they wanted to try and understand who was coming. So they have these counters installed using Internet of Things to give live time data fed back into a central point. So you can see they had these positioned in various places to try and measure and monitor the flow of visitors. And this is the data sheet that we received from that. You can see the map on the right with the lake in the central part of southern Sweden. On the left, you can see the visitors per day, and you can see the rhythm to life and how the peaks and the troughs and how we could maybe need management at certain times of year or in certain days of the week. And the tracking at the right-hand side is 1 week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday gets busier and Sunday goes crazy. So it's not always just about managing the landscape or managing the destination. Sometimes there are opportunities. And here you can see that there's an opportunity to actually perhaps provide guided tours on the days that these visitors, there's more visitors and it's busier. Or alternatively, you can find and offer different routes for visitors to take on different days to try and disperse the flow of people. So data is important, and you can use it in ways that helps manage your destination. The other thing that we did was use Telia. They are the phone provider, one of the biggest ones in Sweden. We used some insights from their ability to track mobile phones. And this was done, the data was of course anonymous. You couldn't tell who was doing something. But what you could do was tell when a mobile phone moved from one place to another in Sweden. So if you look at this map on the right-hand side, you'll see purple squares. There's numbers in those squares, but just ignore them. That's a code for that number. But the squares cover an archipelago. And we wanted to know when people were moving in and out of that archipelago. And we knew that there were some hotspots in the summer where it was a lot of people. So what the data told us was when someone was outside the purple and then moved into the purple. So we were able to track over a period of a year, and you see it in the left-hand side here, how that movement worked. In the middle, you can see two great big peaks. Those are June and July. July especially is really busy in Sweden because that's when the Swedes go on holiday in Sweden, as well as all the visitors coming. So July even went off the scale. You can see it's past the number grid of 10,000 people in one place. So, but what it also told us, which we didn't know, was that people are going into the archipelago destination throughout the whole year over the weekends. So there's potential, if you look, between April, May, and then September and October, perhaps for restaurants, nature guides, other food places, to start thinking about being open and collaborating so there is something more to do in the quieter times and building on that. So that's an interesting use of Telia data, even though it's quite simple and it's quite anonymous. I'd like to highlight voluntary tourism here. So you can look in your own time at the video. Sorry, I can't share it, but it's about the Faroe Islands. And they've run a project called Closed for Maintenance. And exactly next weekend, every year for the last 6 years, they've invited 100 tourism volunteers to come and rebuild pathways within the Faroe Islands and stay with locals. So it's been a beautiful experience, really. Very productive. It got a lot of profile in the media. Every year I've applied to do it, but I never got in. So I'm going to the Faroes anyway next weekend myself. But this voluntary aspect where you're actually allowing the visitor to understand more about the culture, you're allowing them to immerse themselves in the local community and do something good in terms of repair. It's kind of a beautiful thing, really. So have a look online yourselves. So those are all quite happy stories, and those are all very sort of productive and strategic ways of trying to manage our visitors. But what happens when it goes slightly wrong? I'm now going to share a story in Scotland about a tipping point. And that tipping point happened when there was over-tourism because of a new, what shall I say, a new packaging of a destination that always existed. This is Scotland. It's quite a beautiful picture there, and it really does look like that in some parts of the north and the west. But this is a story about the recalibration of a tourism experience. So I wanted to think about what is over-tourism in this context. Well, if I look at a definition, it states that it would exceed physical, ecological, social, economic, psychological, and or political capacity thresholds. Let's have a think about what was impacted the more I tell you the story. The very, very north of Scotland, the map's on the left-hand side here. So that's maybe 3 hours north of Edinburgh or Glasgow, the two major cities. So way up north, the very, very north, is a route that always existed. Small villages, beautiful long empty beaches, amazing countryside, nice little cute inns to visit. But what they did was they decided to package it. It was 500 miles and they called it the North Coast Route 500. So there we have it on the left-hand side. They created an app so that had all, I think, around 2,000 companies that were listed here, different types of companies, toilets, locations, museums, maps. And then social media loved it. So it became very popular. And the aim was to try and generate more tourism, but also more tourism in the quiet times, because most people stay in the central belt in Scotland if they're only there for a few days. And this is the journey that it took. 2014, the idea came. Would we call the tourism that they had then under tourism? Not sure. I think they were busy June, July and August anyway. But the idea was to try and gain tourism and spread it out throughout the year. It launched in 2015. Within 1 year, tourism growth was 52% for accommodation. Within 2 years, it had become one of the top 3 road trips of the world. Now that's mega, because suddenly it appears on everyone's do it before you die list. That had a huge impact, especially on social media, as you can imagine. In 2019, the year before COVID, we were all experiencing what we would call our busiest, some would say best, I would say busiest, and most challenging year in tourism. And that was the tipping point for this route. And I'll explain why. It looked something like this. Very crazy summer months, June, July and August, especially July. And this is what was going on. The tipping point involved things like lots of padlocks starting to appear on bridges where people would romantically ask someone else to marry them or leave their mark. People using the nature as a toilet and not knowing how to do that in a clean way. Queues everywhere, queues for toilets, queues for restaurants, accommodation being full, buses decanting groups of people out in the nature and leaving them to walk wherever they wanted without a guide. Parking was crazy. On the bottom, you can see all the camper vans on the lower part of this photo. People used barbecues on beautiful nature and left burn marks. Waste was left everywhere and camper vans were around. So this was a real challenge for the local communities. And it got to the point where the local community were just, they'd reached their maximum tolerance and something had to change. So what did change? Well, they began to analyse what had happened. And when the app had been developed and thought about, they just did it with a linear thinking that they just wanted to increase the number of visitors coming to the north of Scotland. So they just wanted bums and beds. They wanted to increase with a nice steady growth, and they thought that would work. But in reality, it was like a positive feedback loop. It was a self-reinforcing process, and it led to unsustainable growth. But who actually owns the product in this system? Is it the app that should take the responsibility for the challenges and the negative impacts that were happening in these places at the busy times during June, July and August? So you really need to dig a bit deeper, because we have 2,000 companies on the app. We have an infrastructure that would involve tourism and government departments, but we needed to dig deeper. And in order to do that, you need to do a stakeholder analysis. So the example I have here on the left and on the right are exactly the same thing. The left shows the 45 different stakeholders, and the right is them grouped into clusters so we could more easily manage who was who and what their purpose was. The aim of the whole thing was to change the negative effects of over-tourism on the North Coast 500. That was the overall aim. So then we had to map in according with who had the most influence in relation to that and who had the most importance and who was it impacting more. So that's a simplification of the mapping of all of the stakeholders. But then we had to think of ways and different tools on how to actually change the situation that we were in. So it's interesting when you bring groups of people together, that was the important part, that everyone was involved. So everyone from tourism experience deliverers, accommodation providers, the local council, the police, tourism departments, the municipalities, the regions, everyone got together. So there was a wonderful source of angles of viewpoints. And when you take a model like this, backcasting model, you can all sit and think about your vision for the future. Then you think about where we are now, how you want to get there, and some new ideas and innovations to do that, and then an action plan so it actually happens. So that's one way that you worked with them. Another fun visioning tool that helps sort of with destination alignment and everyone thinking how they want it to be is writing a postcard from the future. And so this is more of a fun exercise, but it gets everyone engaged, especially if you put people in groups so that they're working with someone that they've never really collaborated with before, and they hear their viewpoint too. So these are just two examples, but out of all of that came a communication change management plan. And I won't go deeply into that, but I just want to highlight that the steps were really a sort of an assessment step where you have clear communication channels and information. And then you start to build trust in the group and with themselves so that you can then start looking at how you can build capacity with training and development. And then what would the interventions be? What are the things we need to change and how are we going to change them? And then solutions around resilience that are aligned to the vision that you create. So that's just a quick overview of the more sort of strategic bit. But what are the fun bits that came out of that and the ideas that could get implemented really quickly and have a big change so that by the time next year, next summer comes, it won't be the same? The top one you can see here on the left, Press Pause Project. Basically, the community got together and a project was formed so that tourism would pause and they would take stock, analyse, do some of the examples that I've just given and decide how they would like tourism to be run by them as part of the community for the future, not done to them. And so a group, and I'm going to share a bit more, but they were called Scotto, and that project has now actually been rolled out around many villages all the way around this North Coast 500. Another solution was for actually to use some kind of and choose an accreditation tool, a development tool, an eco-label, whatever you want to call it, whichever focus they had, but something that was more objective, which meant everyone could work on the same tool in order to analyse the sustainability of the destination and make decisions. So that's a really nice way of bringing something neutral into the process. And then we've talked about volunteer tourism, and that was something else that was highlighted as being beneficial. So there were lots of solutions, and that's the good thing. Next thing was to really implement them. So this is the website of the Scottish Community Tourism Organisation, where they are looking to basically give communities the say and the voice and the facilitation skills in order to change tourism in these small communities that were being negatively impacted. So that was the first step. So that was basically a recalibrated journey which became delivered locally, led by the community and for the community, but so that all of the visitors and the locals could experience a more positive tourism experience, because it's important that tourism could continue in these areas. These rural areas need that for the economy. So that's a success story out of a very unusual, busy app that took off faster than they predicted. But now we'll completely switch to a more community-led initiative and some stories that I bring back to you from Kenya. I've just been working with community-led tourism, which is where I'd like to be working in the future. So if anyone has any projects in mind, do knock on my door. You'll see my LinkedIn later on. But the two I've been working in now were in the Masai Mara in Kenya and also in the north in Mount Kenya, where there's a lot of agroforestry and reforestation going on. But I did one of my projects for Planetera. You may have heard of them. Planetera are an organisation who work as an intermediate between tour companies who sell tours and products, but wish to redress the balance by planting trees. So they, if you like, are the facilitating middlemen who actually make sure that the planting is going on in the country that you've chosen. They work with the likes of G Adventures and Flight Centre. And so, for example, if someone books a 2-week holiday, 14 days, 14 trees will be planted in that destination. So I worked and visited, on the left here, Trees for Kenya. Planetera have chosen to use Trees for Kenya to work with agroforestry, reforestation companies in order to benefit the local people. So I'll share a little bit about how that actually works and how the end result. This gives you a list. Of course, it brings economic benefits, job creation, better environment, water and food security, climate resilience, improved health, and creates connections with nature. But these top lines don't even start to share what really happens with the ripple effect when you give the opportunity. Here is the Gaturi women who started 6 years ago with a small piece of land that one of them had where nothing was grown on it. So you give 16 women 6 years, and what you end up with through the Planetera tree planting scheme was that they became a nursery. You can see all the little seedlings in the bags here. They became a nursery for growing the trees, which then were then passed on to the forestry, who then planted it, and so on. From that, they then became an agroforestry piece of land where they were growing fruit trees and other edibles. They were growing fodder, so they were then able to have animals. And they started to become entrepreneurs because they grew so much and they had so much income they could reinvest. So you jump 6 years, they now have milk, which they can consume themselves and sell. They now have fruits, which they can consume themselves and sell. So they have more income. They now have animals, which they can feed and milk or sell. And now they have a nursery, which they have as an entrepreneur. So from starting with zero, and in 6 years, they've been able to put all their children through school, primary and secondary. One of them is now at university. They've brought better nutritional balance to their communities because they used to eat mostly carbohydrate and grains. Now they have fruits and vegetables. And they've got amazing self-esteem. And I've never seen so many happy singing groups of women as they work in their piece of land that they have built. And now they're looking to buy another piece of land. And that shows the ripple effect and how that affects their communities, their families, their health, their well-being, and their mental health, because they have such a great sense of achievement. We now jump to the Masai Mara, literally jumping. As you would know, that's their skill and their strength for the warriors. Masai Mara, this is all about benefits of tourism and making sure that they get to the right people. And quite often, if a Masai Manyata, that's where they live, the circle with the mud huts around it. If a Masai Manyata is not dealing direct with tour operators and only a driver, then sometimes things can happen where they don't always benefit as much as they should from the experience they do. So this was some research that I was doing to find out how it was on the ground. And the output of that is that we will run a CBT, community-based tourism development, to help support them and strengthen them and empower them in order to package and deliver tourism in ways that they're comfortable with, but that ensure that they get more benefits. So that was the Masai Mara. This is Helen, who ran and set up Te Pesua community for basically women and young girls who were in vulnerable situations. She aimed to just give them support and give them a better quality of life. But in the end, it's developed into a tourism experience. You can see the mud hut in the corner where people can stay. There's a Maasai demonstration and interaction around village life and dancing. They make jewellery, which they can sell. So that's the tourism part. And what that does is it funds 2 schools, one for girls, one for boys, and the well-being of lots of women, not just young girls, but also women who've perhaps been widowed and are on their own. So that's an amazing story with the connection with tourism. So I think perhaps you've seen how in all of the examples I've given, sometimes it's a lot of small things that then become either a big negative impact or a big positive impact. But it can be the small things that make the change. All right, welcoming responsible travellers. Let's have a look at how different regions do that and try and ensure that at least the knowledge is shared. In Sweden, there's a belief that if you share more about nature and you talk about the depth of connection and the meaning behind the fragility of the environment that you're in, that is probably the best way of saving it. They have the right to roam, and this was a video, but you can go on and look at it, that tells about how a visitor should respect the landscape, respect the people or the farmer who's nearby. But you have literally the right to roam anywhere in Sweden as long as you leave no trace and respect the environment. In Finland, they have a responsibility guide for their travellers. In Scotland, they have a responsible guide also, which talks about being considerate to local communities and enjoying slow travel. In the Arctic of Sweden, they have care for the Arctic, not just for tourism companies, but also for visitors. And then in Norway, this movie, it's really funny. I know it's not funny, me telling you it's funny, but basically they put voices to animals, and the animals are telling you how to respect nature and how to be mindful of nature and wildlife, flora and fauna while you're there. So have a look at that one. Wisdom from the Wild, it's what it's called. And that's from Visit Norway. So there are many different ways for us to try and connect our visitor with the landscapes that we're in, and also to know and understand how to respect it, because we don't always know and we don't always think, and sometimes there's innocent things that we do. But it's really important that we do that now in tourism. I've spoken a little bit about seasonality, so I'm going to talk about the balancing of it. But first I'll share a welcome notice. Nobody in their right mind would come to Helsinki in November, except you badass. Welcome. This was at the ferry port in Helsinki. So it was commending anyone that dared visit Helsinki in the depths of dark November. But as we know, there are benefits to coming in the dark. Wilderness cooking by Do the North. This is a kayak company in Sweden. We're trying to pull the season longer. And so they offer these experiences in April, May, and also September and October, because these are things that you can do in the nature in all weathers. Scotland 20 years ago, 25 years ago, was a very seasonal country with the craziness happening in June, July, and August. But what they did was actually work harder with outdoor activity providers and wildlife watching. And that's really what set tourism up in Scotland for being the year-round destination that it is now. And simple things at the beginning, like bed and breakfasts or hostels or anyone really sharing a wildlife watching calendar. And then you can see that there's something to do in every season. And then building packages and experiences and getting guides to come in and help means that every type of accommodation can collaborate in order to extend the season and become throughout the year. I think also adapting it for families is an important one to help extend the season. And this is a really good example. This was a dusk watch experience by Speyside Wildlife, This is in the centre of Scotland, in the wooded area. They realised that there was nothing for anyone to do in the evenings, any time of year, in relation with nature tourism. So you can see on the left, they built this house. It had 3 layers of glass, triple glazing, so no smells or noise could get in or out. On the right, you can see that they built the level of soil high up, so it was level with the windows. And they had a light, which as the evening became dark, this yellow animal-friendly light increased. So the animals weren't jarred by it, and there was able to be some close viewing. And basically, the main event was this on the bottom left, a pine marten. If the pine marten came, then you'd tick that box. But at the same time, there was always some storytelling around any type of animal that came. And as you walk home, the deer are there watching you as you get back to your car. So this was a really great example of all-round tourism, families, guided experiences, and accessing nature. But there's other ways to do it, and I think festivals are another way to do that. I listed them here. Maybe there's some inspiration. Spring and autumn festivals, bushcraft festivals, agricultural tourism, food provenance, wild food, big tree, seaweed, big nature, geological festival, and dark skies. And all of these festivals do not happen at peak time. They all happen in the quieter times, but they enable packaging and other accommodations to build on the fact that the festival is happening and create a destination. Here is Pia. She lives in this little island miles away on the west coast of Sweden. 1.5 hours from Gothenburg and 20 minutes in a boat. In November, she suddenly had lots of Asian people coming to visit, and she couldn't understand why. It was dark, crazy weather, so she asked. And it turns out she was in a guidebook, and they promoted coming to see a storm in her place. And these Asian people, they wanted to see a storm. And suddenly she found herself selling a storm. So she built on that, and she created stay on a desert island packages, lobster fishing, which you could still do in those months. But then she started to pull in the local people too, and invite them to come in these quieter, darker months for after work, hang out in the sauna, come for food, and even stay on a Sunday, Monday, which is kind of an unusual but budget option. So she packaged it in different ways. Here we have the gibbon experience in Laos, as you would call it. 3 tree houses, and they're connected by zip lines. Underneath, the gibbons live. They needed a way to conserve them, protect them, so they created this tourism experience. You could zip line from one to the other, and the income from those protected and conserved the environment. So there's many, many different ways to increase the season. I'll touch here on inclusivity. Everyone should be welcome. In Sweden, there's a hostel. On the left, they have the counter that can move up and down. And on the right-hand side, they have zoomy buggies that can go through the forest. You don't need a path. You can access the sort of rough terrain and give freedom and independence to people. They also work on the snow. And there's also a database in Sweden where any type of accommodation, office, shop, experience can register and basically describe what they have. So this is an accessibility database. So you can upload pictures of your arrival area, your rooms, your toilets, with dimensions and distances. So that way the guest can decide if something is suitable for them and accessible for them. Inclusivity. And here I share with you my most top-end composting toilet that's accessible that I've seen on my travels out in the nature, complete with visuals on the door of the nature that you're seeing nearby. So this is an outdoor toilet that's suitable for wheelchairs. I'm going to finish off now by talking with transformative experiences. This is a Sami experience. I was going to show the video, but I'll tell you about it. Basically, this man rebuilt his family Sami traditional home in the north. And he invites only 12 groups per year to come and visit him, and they stay for a week. And they have a deep, immersive, transformative experience on his culture, his family life, his environment, the flora, the fauna, the animals, and a way of life that is changing rapidly alongside the challenges that are faced by the reindeer herders like him, who are having challenges because of climate change and the mining that's happening in the north. So that's a full, immersive, transformative experience, and a very nice experience to watch. These are 3 experiences connected with nature. The left-hand one is a dolphin trip where I saw no dolphins, a wolf tracking trip where I saw no wolves nor heard any, and a whale watching trip where I saw no whales. And what I wanted to share here was that even when you're in the environment, you can create a transformative experience for the guest simply by describing more about the animal and the environment and the rhythms to life and the nature, the weather. If you see on the right here, there's a lady with a jar of plankton. That was on the whale watching trip. I learned so much about plankton. So I never felt that I'd missed out, even though I'd had this immersive experience where I didn't see what I thought I might. So think about how you can implement that into some of your experiences. This is the Hurtigruten, and this goes a boat that goes along the west of Sweden. They offer king crab, and if you look, some of them have a QR code stuck to their, that's it there. That QR code, when you scan it, tells you a little bit about the crab, where it was caught, the fishermen, and the environment in the sea. That's a nice little bit of storytelling. We have an archipelago in the east of Sweden. It's actually one of 5 that are sequential along the coast. Just an archipelago. But someone wrote an article about the 5 archipelagos. And then that got picked up by National Geographic as a sea trail. So you never know when a happy accident can happen and somebody can think about packaging up your coastline in a different way when it really was already there. I'll finish off now with a little overview, if I still have enough time and it's okay, about the eco-label Nature's Best, because I think this is interesting for you to know about if you're working with nature tourism. Nature's Best Sweden, if you Google it and look for the website, you'll find all of their data is open data. So you have access to all the criteria. So go for it if you want to get some frameworks and some ideas on things to look at. But Nature's Best Sweden, that's when I lived in the north, up in the Arctic Circle. And I learned a lot more about the Sami traditions and their herding skills, their clothing, dog sledding. There's many, many immersive experiences that are connected to tradition and deeply immersed in nature. But the core criteria in Nature's Best really focuses on 6 themes. One is to respect the limitations in the destination. So any ecotourism should be minimizing negative effects. Supporting local economy, that's really important. And it's really important with the infrastructure, the more rural and more empty the landscape is, that we can keep income and economy going for those in the vicinity and collaborate. Make all the operators' activities environmentally sustainable. That's in how you operate. And then that you give something back and that you contribute in some way to the conservation and the impacts that you might make on the landscape. The fragility of the landscape is really relevant, and that's important that it's shared with the guests so that they have a deeper understanding and knowledge about the environment that they're in, as well as learning more in general about the experience that they do. And then, of course, it's important that they have a quality experience, but it's safe, and that they have something memorable to reflect on when they're home. So those are the 6 key aspects, but behind that, there's 100 things that we look at. And in addition to that, there are many sectors that we work with. So all of this data, you can see them here. There's 17 different themed criteria. So if you're interested, have a look. Part of the process for the company is that they create a destination analysis, an environmental plan and a sustainability policy as part of going through the ecotourism label. And we also look at tourism working on someone else's land. And that's an important factor for many nature companies, that you've had a collaborative experience with those landowners whose land you're working with. So we study that. Nature's Best also have a sister scheme that looks at certifying nature guides. It looks at everything from planning and evaluation, leadership, security, food and preparing outdoor food and so on. And that's reviewed every 3 years. So in Sweden, quite a lot of nature companies use it as a much needed tool when they're recruiting employees, or they use it for their onboarding process. So my reflections to close are really, quite often people say, oh, there are just so many accreditations and labels, visitors get confused. Are they really relevant? How do we know? Well, having worked with many of them for 23 years, I would say that as long as a company is working with something and uses it as a framework and a structure to start measuring and monitoring and nudging forward with sustainable work, then it's all good, and it doesn't matter which one they're using. That's my thoughts as an overview in terms of that. So if you're working with a label of any framework or sort, then it's a good sign. The next big thing will be a lot of small things, and I recognise that the people I'm talking to today are working with exactly that idea. A lot of small things can make a big impact on the environment, but also for the visitors' reflections. And it all comes out through the Sustainable Development Goals as one of our example frameworks that we all are really working with. So thank you for taking the time to listen. That's sharing of some sustainable memories, and I wish all of you sustainable memories too. Thank you for listening.
What a brilliant presentation, Kim. It was really, really nice. You know, you took us through so many experiences. Reminded me of my trip to see the gibbons on a zip line, and this was a few years ago when we started. But I'm the kind of work that you put in, I'm absolutely amazed. This is what we need. We need scientific approach. We need data collection. We need data analysis, and everything that our decision makers do. They do it for people. They do it for their survival, their sustainability. They want to promote it. But what happens is that in that rush, in that haste to do it, they take a decision without having any formal framework around it. Green destinations is not everywhere. A whole lot of countries are adopting it, but many countries feel that they don't really need to adopt it. Or, GSTC is still struggling to partner with hundreds of companies and hundreds of people. So I really like what you said. As long as you partnering with somebody to take a piggyback ride, or do your own thing, or create your own opportunity, you're on the right track. Many small things will make a big thing, and that's so true. Yeah, go on, Kim. Tell us a bit more about your story. How did you get started with it?
Oh, how did I start with tourism?
Yeah, with ecotourism. Just a quick one.
Yeah. So I joined Visit Scotland in 1998. And it was an interesting one because then they had the STAR scheme, and I was working with the Quality Assurance Department, and it was only focused in quality and condition of different types of tourism experiences. But as a sister organisation, they had their green scheme that was even live then, and that was, I think it's now 23 years old. But they didn't invest so much in it, and it was still seen as a bit of on the side, on the edge. And now that STAR scheme no longer exists, but the green scheme is still around. And that says something about the evolution of how tourism has gone, because within the internet, It's replaced those stars for quality. We can read, albeit subjective reviews about how the experience is, but we still need another type of tool to tell us how they're working with sustainability.
Wonderful, wonderful. We have a question. Would you like to answer? There's a question from Dia Parmar. Dia is asking, how does a novice do something for their native Himalayan community, which has a handful of dying crafts? The educated have moved out of the cities, and it's already on the edge of tipping point due to government-initiated smart village programs. So essentially what she's saying is that how do we approach the subject of handling dying crafts, or where we're saying that smart villages are happening? Are they actually smart enough to ensure sustainability, or are they eating into our resources and all of that?
So is she really asking about how to conserve and package that so it doesn't disappear?
Essentially.
Yeah. So, well, the first thing that comes to my mind is to reach out to some organizations that are working with community-based tourism support. Because if you can manage to, if you have a group within the community who are interested, and if you do some research of community-based tourism groups and funding, like even TUI, TUI? They run a program that they will provide funding and match it to do things like this. But essentially, a community-based tourism program is going to give the community, it's going to be built from the community up, and it's going to give them the empowerment in order for a longer-term project that's going to go on once the community-based training has gone, and it provides that infrastructure. I would do a Google, and I can sort of give some links to try and with ideas and so on of organizations that do it. But that is exactly what community-based tourism funding wants to help.
Yeah. In India, we have very little knowledge of CBT. It's happening in pockets, small pockets, and it's happening in certain parts of India, but it's not hugely prevalent. Whereas we have an unending scope of CBT work. And that's something that we're going to tackle at Global Wildlife Fair, where we have some CBT experts coming and talking to us. We've been working with Planetera for some time now. And they have their SOPs and things like that. I think you've really said the right thing. CBT is the name of the game where we really need to be working with. We have, in India, we've got these problems where people do not know the basic concept of CBT, and sometimes it's, misconstrued. It's looked at as we're doing something to do with CBT, but it's using the skill as cheap labor. So those are the challenges that we need to overcome when we look at CBT. CBT has to be completely self-independent and self-financing and or even if it gets funding, it needs to have its benefits sown and reaped within the system, not taken out for it to last much longer. So I at some point of time, Kim, you and I will again go online, and not now, but maybe in a few weeks or couple of months, talk about CBT, maybe get one or two more people who are CBT experts, and let's do a complete session or series of sessions on CBT so that people who are struggling with this in India should get quick hacks to get started with it.
I think that would be a great idea. I think it's an interesting one. It's called CBT, community-based tourism, but it should almost be renamed community-led tourism, and in that way, because that is the purpose. It's to empower a community so that they can just run with it once they've got the skills and the knowledge and the structure set. So yeah, I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah. And then Anjali is saying we have the concept of limited weather tourism to conserve biodiversity. Of course, it goes hand in hand. Tourism is a sort of tool that uses every resource that we have on the planet. And so is tourism going to put it back? Is it going to look at the resource as a renewable resource, as a resource that it can put back? So we need to answer these questions, whether we just want to continue to use it or we want to keep renewing those resources so that we don't fall short. And wildlife is one such thing. It shares the same space as you and I do. And like I say, it's people to people conversation. Wildlife doesn't need you, but we need it. And then it's our conversation that needs to answer these questions. And we need to continue to live with them and then ensure that they just don't sustain, they also multiply in number. Because if tourism has to look at it as a resource to run business, then it needs to ensure its longevity and its sustenance. So wildlife, of course, is that as well. We have a different approach in India where we are not currently happy talking about biodiversity economy, and we are also to a large extent vegetarians, and then we also have in our culture animals as gods and deities, and there are reasons for all of that, and it's all linked with conservation, but that's another topic and we need to go deep into it when we talk about wildlife.
There was, in the stakeholder analysis that I shared, that was an interesting one because they actually had nature as a stakeholder in that analysis, and you hear that more and more now, bringing nature in as someone sits at the table.
Yeah, wonderful. And it was fantastic. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Nice to chat.
And we've got friends whoever has been here will also get a replay link in their inbox, and those also, of course, they're not listening to me because they're not here, but people who registered and couldn't make it will also get the replay link. So nobody will miss this opportunity. If you missed out some part of it, I suggest that you go through the entire webinar once again. Write down your notes. I shared Kim's LinkedIn on the group. Connect with her and ask your questions, right? And then let's bring her to India as soon as we can.
Lovely. Yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a really nice session.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. You have a great time. See you, friends. Catch you on another day with another webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye. Namaste.